Kendra, let's start by learning a little bit about you.
Sure. So I am head of operations for Parabol, and I joined the company just over 2.5 years ago, just after raising their Series A round. So before that, I was working at Techstars, which is a company that helps startups through an investment and an accelerator program. And Parabol actually went through the program I was running at the time back in 2019. So it was a fun little transition when I wanted to kind of move back from more of the advisor, kind of helping out on the investment side, move back over into operations. When Parabol was ready to hire a full-time operations role, I said, "Hey, let's talk," and it was a perfect kind of transition over back over the operator side.
That's great. What was the catalyst for them needing to bring on somebody in that role?
It really was ready to scale. They raised their Series A, and before that, it was a small team, and now with money behind them, really feeling like they had product market fit. COVID was also part of a catalyst because we're remote. We fit really well with remote work in terms of it's a meeting software, meeting collaboration software, mostly for agile teams, but our templates work for a lot of different types of meetings. So, really started out in the retrospective space. We've got teams using that on a weekly basis. We also do stand-ups, one-on-one meetings, check-ins. From an operations perspective, we even have templates around like our strategic planning, as well as like performance reviews, peer feedback. We can do all of that kind of within the templates of our product software. And so, needless to say, when COVID hit, everyone went remote. We had a big jump, and that was kind of a forcing function of, okay, we're ready for a Series A. So long story short, that being, okay, it was still a small team. Now, how do we get ready to scale? And so bringing in a full-time operations really to kind of help focus on what is it going to look like? What do we need internally to really scale? And so that's why this first, and still today, I'm the one operations role. So we're still a small team. And so it'll be, fun to talk today, kind of different ways we've been able to scale, but still, from an operations perspective, we're still a team of one.
Got it. Yeah, love it. And when you were brought onto the company, how many employees were there at that time?
I think we were already at 10. They had immediately started doing some hiring, mostly on like the developer side.
Yep.
When I came on, we were in the process of switching from, Gusto and managing all of the, W-2 employees ourselves and switching to a PEO. We went with Sequoia One as a way to scale faster, essentially, because trying to hire and then make sure you've got everything set up in the new state that you're bringing somebody on, it was just going to take too long. And so we were at 10 and we're now at 27, and we're at 10 different countries as well. So we were able to scale and really be able to kind of look for talent anywhere.
Yep.
Instead of being held back by, well, what is the process going to look like if we bring someone on from a particular state or even a particular country?
Yep, sure. So triple the size of the company. You've got people everywhere. It sounds like the meeting software, like you said, is really good for remote organizations. And that's also the type of business that you guys are. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about the operations and how you guys work and what, remote work means for you guys.
Yeah, so I personally have been remote for over 20 years. So I was very familiar with remote work coming into, and it was one of the reasons why when we first saw Parabol as a company to invest in on the Techstar side, I was very interested in seeing the software and loved what it could do. Even though like Agile was their original focus, we started using it internally at Techstars for the way of which we would meet with companies or meet internally with our one-on-ones and our check-ins. And so I knew that, it was remote from the beginning. We had no plans on we wanted to stay remote. That was the plan of the company. And so the one thing I think I even realized when I came on is not only is it remote, we're also very async in terms of there's a lot of autonomy for people to kind of create the environment of which they're going to work best in. And in order to have people across 10 different countries, we cannot all be on at the same time. And so we've got to get really good at asynchronous communication. So obviously we live in Slack, but we also have ways of which, we can limit the number of meetings we have. And so we've got our weekly check-ins that we do, through our software. And then we've got our every other retrospectives where we're then, reflecting and giving feedback. And then the in-between time is really on Slack. And it's, we're not meeting a whole lot in person. And that allows us to kind of grow remotely. But what it means is you have to be really good at written communication and making sure that you're, very clear on what you're asking for, what you need, and being good at asking for what you need. So that is, I think, one of the biggest things that I've even noticed coming to Parabol from other remote environments is the asynchronous side of it. I've had other jobs where I just live on Zoom all day long, and it can be exhausting.
Yeah.
And so that was really kind of where I saw the difference of why Parabol seems to work so well in a remote, fully distributed team.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We've been going through some of those challenges ourselves here at our company. We've got people in 10 plus different countries at this point, and I think as you scale generally, but especially if you're distributed, you have to get really good at email, Slack, one-to-many and one-to-one conversations to make sure things are crystal clear, because people, like you said, aren't online all at the same time. And we've realized that as well, like in communicating through Slack, sometimes, you put a message and people don't see it. So we've realized we have to put things in place to make sure, it's visible to people no matter what time, they're logging on for the day. And then B, without being in person, you can't just turn around in your chair and be like, hey, what do you mean? What are you talking about? People want to just get to the next thing, I find. And so often there's a lot of miscommunications that can happen in Slack when, if something's not extremely clear and, the teams aren't proactively trying to clear those things up as they would do in person. So certainly a challenge. Yep. Glad to hear you guys are, figuring out ways to do that really well. Tell me a little bit about, so you were brought on in the operations role to scale the business. Tell me, what's the whole realm of your role? Obviously, hiring is probably just a part of it. So I'd be curious to learn more about kind of everything in your sphere.
Yeah, so head of operations for Parabol means there is people ops, there's the finance ops, there is just general business operations as well. So it kind of scans across those three areas. And so hiring is definitely one of them. But then it was also finance from the payroll side. What does benefits look like? But then also sales contracts. If sales have any questions, it's coming back to us from a business perspective, needing to make sure that it falls within compliance of our business. And then I also work from a finance perspective. Our CEO takes the lead in terms of head of finance revenue, but I kind of working with accounts receivables, accounts payables, making sure that we've got everything set so that he's not focused on those, the day-to-day pieces of the finance side as well. So
yeah, for
it
sure.
definitely runs between those three areas on a daily basis.
And do you feel like once you reach a certain size or a certain volume of work in one of those areas, that's where you would probably end up hiring people more focused on, let's say, HR, talent acquisition, if you're trying to hire a lot of people and it becomes too much for you to handle with everything else, or sales are, off the charts and you need more.
Yes, I'd love an intro lawyer and not have to review contracts. That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, no, I absolutely think the larger we get, it makes a lot of sense to have somebody more specialized in people operations. That's not my background. And so we rely a lot on people across the company when it comes to hiring to kind of fill in those gaps. And then I'm the one that can just make sure we're doing everything we need to do from end to end. And then I manage the relationships we need to have with our PEOs, with our external recruiters, the headhunters. I'll manage those relationships, but it really comes down to, needing to pull everyone in when we're hiring.
Yep. So you're really facilitating the process and making it really collaborative. And I think that's what, companies of your guys' size need to do, right? It's it's a team effort, and it's important to bring everybody from the team. Well, not everybody, but you know what I mean, into the hiring process, because ultimately, when you're at 20, 30 people, every single person is a pretty significant add to the business. And so to have everybody on the same page about the people that you're bringing in is really important for continuing to build the culture and ultimately, bringing on the best people to do the job. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about the hiring process, how you get other people involved. What does that typically look like?
Yeah, so if we have a role, we typically have the hiring manager then be who is ever going to be managing that person so that they can kind of take the lead on reviewing. If we have a recruiter, they'll do the first screening for us at least, so that person's not getting bogged down with just every resume to have to go through. They will have somebody kind of do that first screening. And then from there, the hiring manager will do a kind of fit for role interview is what we call it. And so they're managing that first phase. If they want to proceed to the next phase, we call it then a fit for organization. And we actually do like a culture style interview where we're pulling in people from, it used to be from, we wanted to get kind of all areas, but then it was like, we don't need to overwhelm the candidate. And so we try to get at least like 3 people and have it be somebody from directly with who the team they'd be working with, but then, see some outside teams as well. And so from that, it's more of a panel style. We try to make it as unintimidating as possible, that it's just here, like, you're here to kind of see who we are as well. Like we tell them to come with questions as well as our questions. And that one's really kind of to see how they fit within the organization. And then we do something really unique that I hadn't seen before coming to Parabol. And that is we do a paid, we call it a batting practice, but like a paid project. And so it's a great way, especially being remote, especially being async, is like, how well is this the right environment for you as a candidate? How well do you work with the team? And we're able to see any kind of questions that we had left from those first 2 interviews. We make sure that we're like ready to have answered by the time we're coming out of that paid project. And so we have like a buddy that is kind of there to kind of help. We use our software to kind of do a pre-retrospective of like, here's the expectations of the project, here's what we're looking for, any questions that they have. And so it's, very clear going into the project kind of what, and we say it's really less about the outcome of the project than it is like learning how well we work together. And so that has kind of helped us because then they're seeing and working directly with who they're going to work with every day. They're in Slack with us. We invite them to the meetings that would be happening that week to kind of give them a full introduction into. And so it's the next best thing in terms of we can't bring them into the office for interviews and walk them around. And so it's a way to, and we pay them for that time, knowing that's a big commitment.
Sure.
It's very part-time. We're not expecting them to like take time off from the job they currently have. It's definitely meant to be, happening at the same time. And so that's worked really well for us just because you get a really good sense of, are they a fit? And they feel confident, like, yes, this is a place I want to come and work by the time we're done.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think, look, there's a lot of companies that do projects or some type of, skills test to see, can this person do the job?
We don't do the front end, like testing kind of stuff at this point in time. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think like the approach that you guys are taking is really important and very effective because it's more of a real world scenario. I think a lot of companies, when they give a project, it's like, all right, here's a little brief, give it to the candidate, go off on your own and do this with maybe not as much context as they would need and not somebody to really ask a lot of questions to. And so, sure, you're getting a feel for what the candidate can kind of do on their own. But if that's not really indicative of the way that they're going to work within your business, it doesn't tell you as much as you would like to know. And so I think the way that you guys are doing it really gives you the insight you need to make sure, hey, will this person be able to thrive in a remote environment? How well do they communicate asynchronously? Mm-hmm. We are a company that powers meetings. How, well are they doing in those meetings and participating and asking questions? And then I think, like you said, on the flip side as well, for the candidate, that really helps them make a decision too. Look, if at the end of the day, they realize this environment just isn't for me, like it doesn't match my work style, maybe I'd prefer to be in person or whatever it is. At least then, right, before you bring them onboard them, and in 30 days, they're like, this isn't for me. And then you got to start the whole process over.
Yeah, exactly.
And how did you guys come up with that?
That is a good question. I have not asked that. It was already in place when I came on. That's how I was hired. I was doing a project on the side. And so we do this for every hire that we've brought on. I will have to ask Jordan, our CEO, where that first, if he brought it from a different, a company he was at before, of where that came from. Because even my husband asked, he's like, where did batting practice come from? I was like, I don't know. It was sports reference, but we'll have to see.
Yeah, well,
So
as a former baseball player, I can appreciate the batting practice reference. And yeah, no, that's really cool. And I think, look, I was looking at your careers page as well, and just all of the resources you make available for candidates. And I think you guys do a great job of being super transparent about, what you guys are all about, what the work environment's like, and to give candidates the ability to self-select in or self-select out if that looks like a place they want to be. So I think the project, really goes hand in hand with the content that you guys are already putting out there for candidates to view on their own. So that's great.
Yeah, I think, a lot of people say this is just about, it's just as much about you wanting to come work for us versus us, wanting you. And I feel like we truly mean that. Like we want to make sure it's a fit because ultimately it affects the culture. If we hire, if we think they're a great talent, but then they don't fit in terms of the way of which we work, then it's just going to have a negative impact on them and on the culture overall. So yes, part of our culture is, we call it open eyes. We're very transparent. And so as much as we can kind of put out there ahead of time, it makes it very easy for them to know exactly what they're walking into and what they're saying yes to when we bring them on.
Yeah. And look, I think every company, there's these different phases they go through of their growth, where certain hires are critical. And for the phase that you guys are at, every single person you bring on is critical, not only for the performance of the business, because at this point, the next person you bring on is one of 28. Like that's a pretty significant ratio, but also for the culture that's going to set the tone for the company as you guys grow from 27 to 50 to 100 and beyond, or wherever you guys are going. Like the people you're bringing on now are really going to be the folks that, shape more or less the DNA of the company in its next phase of growth. And so for you guys to be able to properly vet people to make sure that they're going to be the people that you want to come on that journey with you, but also for candidates to be able to make the decision on their own that this is the place I want to be, for potentially years to come. It's really important that those two things sync up, because you don't want to be in this position where you guys are at right now and trying to scale to, let's say, 50 people, but it's constantly 2 steps forward, 1 step back because people are coming in and out the door because there's not good alignment happening throughout the hiring process.
Yeah, we actually had an internal conversation around, could we accommodate and try to hire in more like South America where English would not be the first language. And we've decided it would just be too difficult. It'd be too big of an impact on the culture, even though we now have enough people that also speak Spanish that they could probably function and the work output would be great, but we're not quite large enough. There's not enough of them where it wouldn't have a negative impact on how they would feel involved in the overall company, because there's not. And so it's fun to have these conversations like, okay, can we get large enough? Like when is the right time to then even be able to expand, not just the countries we're in, but also the languages of which we can take on. And so, yeah, we've had some of those conversations and just kind of said, we're still a little too nervous about what it would do to the culture.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense. And looking ahead, 2024, what are some of the goals specifically as it relates to hiring? Where are you focused?
Honestly, we've slowed down quite a bit and want to just kind of focus on the growth of the product within the team that we have. We're at one of these where we venture backed, we raised that Series A, but we're really close to profitability. And so the external environment that we have around us, it's like, well, do we spend faster and then know that we've got to be ready to raise again? Or could we actually get ourselves to our own profitability, then grow at our own pace and not be reliant on another round of fundraising at a specific moment, like with a hard deadline versus doing it when we're ready to. Yep. And so we've made the strategic plan as to not keep the scale that we have been doing and really focus on profitability. And then once we hit that marker is, okay, now how can we continue to scale again and be ready to raise? So we're still thinking we will go the venture trajectory, but slowing a bit because of external environment that
Yeah.
we'd been given that we were not planning on. Most of us, I don't think, were.
Yep.
And then scaling again. So we'll probably have a fairly quiet 2024 when it comes to hiring, but for really good reason. Like we could actually see profitability and then have a little bit more control over the way of which we want to grow
Yeah.
next.
No, I mean, I think a lot of companies are doing that right now. So I think it's smart. It's all about, these are the times where you really want to drive efficiencies in the business, make processes repeatable. And that way, when you're adding headcount, they're being added to an efficient engine that's sustainable, and you're not going to be, living round to round and, constantly have to do more
Yes.
fundraising to fuel growth of the
Yeah.
business. That the go-to-market engine that you're building is going to be repeatable and sustainable and predictable. So when to add people, and that also, makes the company more attractive when you go into a fundraising round as well, because, future investors are going to look at the systems that you guys have in place and see that you're ready to scale with an infusion of capital. And it's very easy to see where the money needs to go
Right.
because you've driven those efficiencies. So, I think that makes a lot of sense. What have you found, since coming on with the team? I know you guys have placed a big emphasis on culture, but as you think about the hiring process specifically in trying to attract people to the company from all over the world, what have you found to work really well for you guys?
I think our transparency helps a lot. We publish every Friday. We call it the Friday Ship, and we kind of talk about what we're working on. And we're very transparent where sometimes it is how we work and it is the things of which we are discussing internally. And then it's also sometimes, product things that we are working on. And so we're talking about that every Friday. We share our metrics every Friday of how things are going. And so I think that really helps people that are looking for a new job, like finding us from that perspective of they can kind of see the inner workings of Parabol without even talking to us first. So that's one of the ways. And then typically if we've got a specific job, we will look for like job boards that fit our type of culture. So the people first, the remote work, anything around those kind of job boards that are very specific to the way of which we work.
Yep.
We will try to target. And then the non-sexy answer of like when we have very specialized headhunters, like those have definitely just been one of the faster ways when we've got a very specialized, like our DevSecOps, like when we like finding somebody it's worth the investment because they can bring us candidates faster. But in terms of like people that have found us, they've been really great hires. And so we know the work that we do on a regular basis of just putting information out there about us, not just the product, but also about the company and who we are as people and the way of which we're trying to build this. That's really attracted the type of candidates that fit our culture.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So you guys have taken like the total build in public type of approach.
Yes, yes. Open source, like you can see from the early buildings of the actual product. And then from the weekly ships, you can kind of see how we've talked about the way of which we do strategic planning, our actual hiring process of that batting practice I talked to you about. Like we outlined all of that. When we did a retreat and a lot of people started talking about the 4-day work week. And so we actually broke up into groups and we talked about it. We end up doing what we call wellness days where people can now take. And so we shared all the fact that all of that during our Friday ships of how this was going. Here's the experiment we're running. We ran it for, I think, 4 months and then talked about the outcome of it. And so we're sharing all that in the open to kind of let people see what we're building.
I think I mean, first of all, that's really cool, just generally speaking. But as it comes to hiring, I think that's a really unique way to attract people to your organization. And that's how you're getting people that are totally bought in. And before they're really even engaged with you in the hiring process, they know, hey, I want to work for that company because everything's out there in the open. It's super transparent. They can see the things that you're working on, see the way that you're communicating. See obviously the information you're sharing with the public, which means you're sharing all of that with the company as well, and probably even some more. So I think, anybody that values that and sees that, it's going to be really attracted to any type of opportunity, at your business. And I think a lot of companies don't put enough content out there that really gives a candidate insight into what's unique about that organization. And maybe in some cases it's because they really don't have anything super unique in the way that you guys are doing things. But I think it's really cool how you guys have taken your culture and the way you work and really ingrained it into the hiring process to make sure that you're pulling people into the business that are going to really align with the way you guys are running it.
Yeah, we did the same when we were going through like our leveling. Like we from the beginning we've always put salary ranges on, and as a company we pay US average salaries. So even though it's you might be coming from a different country, we've just decided as a company that we're going to pay US average. If you happen to live in a more expensive city than what would be considered the US average, we do give a bump that is specific to your city. And so, but at the same time, we never really had, because we're not that large to begin with, is what does leveling look like? What does, salary adjustments as that goes? And so we've even talked about that during our Friday ships in terms of we've now kind of established exactly what it means to level, what those ranges are for each. And so those are very transparent. I don't think on the Friday ship we shared what all the actual salary ranges were, but we've always posted them for the open job. And then, but internally, all of our, members now know like what the levels look like, what the salary ranges look like. We're one step shy of being completely transparent of like everyone knowing what everyone makes. We haven't gotten to that. We've had the discussion, and there's still, it's the one thing I think we're not fully transparent about. And I think just because for some, it just becomes a little awkward, like knowing the exact person, but the ranges are there. So it's pretty easy to kind of just know where, somebody's going to fall. But
yeah, some deductive reasoning can probably get you there. And yeah, like you said,
yeah.
it can be a little awkward when you can tie an exact number to an exact individual.
Yeah.
More awkward.
But as a head of operations, I love that we are going there because I don't want the indiscrepancy. Like we want to make sure that it's staying fair and it's staying level. And so the more transparent we are, the easier it is to be like, nope, we can't do that because look, this is where, the level falls. We can't be out of step with what we've done for others. It makes it very easy to stay fair and concise against the levels when you're totally transparent with it.
Yeah, look, you're managing expectations both with employees, but then also people that you bring on. It's very clear, everything that you guys are doing, how you're paying, what the paths for growth look like. And so I think that's great. It's you always want to reduce surprises for people.
Yes.
So the more you can do that by being transparent in your communications and the information that you're putting out there, the better candidate and employee experience you're going to drive. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it helps. Like, there's very limited space for negotiating your salary because we now know exactly what the the frame is for that particular role, and we're going to make sure it's not it can't be way out of alignment with any of the other roles that we already have on the book. So it helps level that field in terms of, well, somebody was just really good at negotiating and somebody else didn't and they just took what was offered. It's like we no longer have those discrepancies happening either.
Yep. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been great. I've really loved learning about what you guys are up to. I am a huge fan of the culture that you guys have and that you continue to build. And like I said, I was, scouring your careers page and looking at all the information you guys had available. And I was blown away, especially at the stage you guys are at now that you already have all of that built out. But I think the fact that you're establishing that as your culture now and hiring people into that culture now, like we talked about earlier, is really going to be, the foundational DNA for your business moving forward. So it's been great learning about it. And thanks so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool.